The Andor Season 2 finale has wrapped up. Overall, the last arc really just felt like a speed run and kind of highlights of what they intended to do with the 5th season. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever watched, but I thought a lot of the first 2 episodes of these 3 hinged on kind of out of character things for where we're at in the story, probably because we didn't have enough time for them to fully develop these decisions. And to me, it just really feels like the middle 6 episodes is the story that they really wanted to tell. And the 1st and 4th batch were just kind of necessary to make some tie-ins and setups. But before I get into the episodes, the first thing I want to get into, and this is a spoiler, is that Bix is an absolute villain. I don't know why this moment is being shared around as some kind of touching moment because it plays on the themes and she's had her character go through terrible things and never thought a life was possible, and Andor's legacy will be carried on. What she did in any context is repulsive. She literally lied to Andor, kidnapped his kid, that's what you would call it if a father took away his baby without the mother's consent, and manipulated him to go off and fight and eventually die in the rebellion while she lives the peaceful life that he's been asking for years in the story's timeline. I think you can pretty plainly say that Andor wanted a family the whole time and stability. We saw him looking for his sister. He wanted his mother figure to go with him. He asked Bix all season this season, which covers 4 years, to just run away from the rebellion, live a peaceful life, and have a family. And she says no, 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 over and over. And I'm just really surprised to see people being like, oh, it plays on the themes of hope that have been touched on all season for the rebellion. And oh, Andor's legacy will carry on. Not only is it gross and incredibly immoral what she did, I actually think it's also more poorly written than the alternative. And in any other context, this decision would be like a villain origin story. Like, oh, my mom lied to my dad and ran away from him while he went to go fight a war that he didn't want to be in. And then she had me, I was grown up fatherless and never knew my dad because he died in that war when he actually would have rather been a father to me. That's like some textbook villain shit for Andor Jr. or whatever his name ends up being. Probably fucking Grogu too. It is not in any way noble or heroic to manipulate your significant other into sacrificing their life while you go fuck off and live the peaceful life that they wanted. And the reason I said this is more poorly written than the alternative is because the alternative, and one that they probably could still do at the end of episode 9, is Cassian decides at that point he's fully committed to the rebellion after what he saw in Gorman. There's no way that he can live in peace knowing these atrocities are going on, blah, blah, blah. Bix says, hey, I'm pregnant. This could even be after the year time jump. And then Cassian has to choose if he wants to finally go for the thing that he's been searching for the duration of the series and live a peaceful life with a family, or if he wants to risk his own life to protect his child's future. And at that point, he can decide and say, hey, I have to fight in this rebellion for Andor Jr.'s future and your future. Please fuck off to a farm planet. Don't tell me where you're going. I'll come find you after the war if I survive. It's like a very standard heroic choice between the thing that you want and the thing that you feel is an obligation. And the show chose to completely circumvent this in favor of kind of a touching montage music video moment at the end and the themes. I just can't believe this is being praised as some great fucking moment. And this is also going to be so much ammunition for the people that bitch about girl boss shit and Disney shit, where the father is just lied to, made ignorant, and then thrown off to be sacrificed in the war without full knowledge of the situation because he's manipulated by a woman and the woman is framed as justified. And frankly, given how many characters have really complicated moral systems and situations, I'm kind of shocked that this would have just slipped through the cracks in favor of my themes. All right, well, now that I'm done ranting about this, because I feel like I'm a fucking alien in a different world where I haven't seen anyone else even mention this online, let's get into the actual arc itself. This one reminds me kind of the first arc, where it's got plenty of good little moments. Everything done in this arc feels like it could have been done in like one episode. And Luthen is my favorite character, but to structure the story this way, where we get his backstory as he's dead, to see the relationship between him and Clea, just feels like they could have done so many other things with this limited time they had in the final year before Rogue One, before the full-blown rebellion. I just don't understand the choice. Kind of like the first arc, where it's like, why are we having Andor piss off on a jungle for 3 episodes just to show the rebellion is in disorder or disarray? Why are we taking 3 episodes for a Mon Mothma wedding when we know Tay is going to die in about 10 minutes? It's just weirdly inefficient storytelling for a show that's been so competent, even if people criticize it for being too slow, including myself. And I really enjoy this first scene with Luthen, but then I hate the next one between him and Dedra. And we end up essentially with what I would call like a Kleya episode and a half. And it just sort of feels like, why at this point in the story? Like, this is your season finale. You took all that time to build up the Gorman massacre. Now would be the time to have the rebellion sparking and really go out on a high note instead of a kind of character-focused couple episodes with some plot points that I think really needed a lot more time for development for Dedra in particular. Lonnie says that he's had Dedra's access codes for like a year, and now he's finally blown his cover. He's burned. Him and his family need to get to safety because he's discovered the Death Star. Luthen freaks out, realizing how big of a deal this is since it's only these 2 that know, and obviously leaves Lonnie dead here on the bench. You can always rely on Luthen for being just completely cold and calculating, and ironically, and somewhat fairly predictably, his love for Kleya as a kind of daughter figure is what actually gets him killed in the end and allows her to escape. Dedra comes in, apparently on Heert's day off, because this gets her in trouble, to arrest Luthen. Would have loved to see some of how he got caught. I would have also loved to see this scene more in character for these 2. The dialogue's all fine. It's interesting. Dedra's doing the thing where she's speaking in a way where they both know what they're talking about until eventually he just outright acknowledges who he is and his role. And I think part of what frustrates me with this is that we kind of don't get much from her post Gorman. It sort of seemed like she might flip to the rebellion or kind of step aside because of what she did. But instead, it seems like she's just overcompensating to justify her actions. And they make her dumb enough to walk in here alone, openly say that she knows who he is, and then let him turn her back to her because she sees the smoke from him destroying his computers and shit. And this allows him to stab himself. I kind of also don't like this for Luthen because it's really hard for me to imagine that he wouldn't have some kind of kill switch for himself, whether it be a fucking capsule in the tooth, some kind of bomb in this place, whatever it may be. With how careful he is and how much planning he does and how willingly he just cuts ties with people, I just don't buy that he wouldn't have a way to kill himself immediately. And essentially this whole arc hinges on him not dying immediately because this is what allows for all the Kleya stuff. This is what makes Cassian come to get her. This is obviously what gets Dedra in trouble. So for me, it's just kind of lame to make him not be prepared for the worst case scenario. And then for the entire arc to rely on that singular aspect, which is a huge deal for his character. So this is really the Kleya episode. Again, would be fine if you had a whole season for a year of content, for a year in the timeline. But man, using a whole episode for this and flashbacks to flesh out her relationship with a dying character, I don't know. Just rubs me the wrong way. We see Partagas and the Imperials freaking out because they know the secret can't get leaked. And then we got our first flashback to Sergeant Lear. His code name is Luthen Rael, which is Lear backwards, whatever. And we see how he was seemingly fighting for the Empire, maybe in the Clone Wars, maybe a little bit after. It's not quite clear with all the ages, but we know it's been about 20 years. And he just doesn't like what it's becoming. He sees Kleya in a vent and takes her in as a kind of adopted daughter. So Dedra's under a lot of pressure. She says, keep Luthen alive no matter what, and clear out the rest of the floor. And essentially tells this doctor, get fucked. It's ISB business. And then we get Kleya undercover. She's trying to kill Luthen so they can't keep him alive and then torture him. And as a character thing, that's fine for me. I think that point works. But the logistics of all this and the amount of time that it takes is just gratuitous. I also really don't like that she can just do everything. I kind of like the idea of her being the smart analyst, keeping track of things for Luthen, reminding him of things he forgets, like a real right hand who's very, very needed. But now she's just kind of a one-man army. They even say they thought 3 people do this break-in at one point. Dedra gets arrested by Hirt, and we find that she's been accessing things that she wasn't supposed to in her pursuit of access. We get another flashback, and the way this is handled, I can't tell if you're supposed to think that she's a better negotiator than Luthen, or this is a ploy that they kind of had in place. Because it seems to me like she's supposed to be just the better negotiator. Like she steps in and just gets it done in like 2 seconds. Just another thing she's good at, I guess. And he explains to her that their relationship will be whatever it needs to be to fight back. We get a little precursor of Luthen with his art when he was obviously much more poor and dealing in much lower quality goods. And throughout the episode, we see Kleya just worming her way closer, getting denied access to the floor, shooting people when she needs to, being stealthy when she needs to, all very dragged out. We see stormtroopers executing a line of citizens that they think might have been associated with someone who sniped one of their men. And this is the sort of thing where I think George Lucas retconning the timeline and changing the gap from like 50 years to 20 because the prequels really hurts the Empire. And this is also sort of what I've talked about all season, where it feels like Andor takes place kind of too late as far as the politics and government in the timeline, because the Empire should have had way more control at that point. This show, and maybe the timeline itself, I'm not sure who's to blame, kind of make it like Palpatine took 20 years to finally get control and then he loses it in like 2, instead of it being like a decade of tyranny, which would be more in line with what we saw with the Inquisitors in the Kenobi show and that sort of thing. It's like, oh, the Empire rose and the rebellion rose right behind it and cut it out at the knees. And of course, none of the people being executed are white. Kleya stays to watch after Luthen told her to move, and he says, "You're on your own." And he just explains to her that you need to keep the hatred, but you can't operate based on it. It needs to stay bottled up inside and motivate you, but you have to fight back with subtlety and cunning. Otherwise, you'll end up on the wall like them. When we go back, Kleya just working her way closer and closer. I'm not exactly clear here why the stormtroopers are not wearing helmets this episode, but like none of them are. I don't know if it's because they're supposed to be operating more like a police type role, but it was just a bit strange to see. We get another flashback where Luthen and Claire are talking, and she wants to push the button to blow up the bomb and kill these people. And he tells her, go ahead, and kind of dares her. And then he takes it and does it himself. Like he wants to keep her hands clean. They're all fine little moments. The timing of this is just weird at the very end of your series while we're watching him die. And there's a good little part in here too where he's like, look over, now slowly get up and come with me, and kind of operate like a normal person would in this situation. Don't just stare at it and be happy or whatever. And he also tells her in the flashback that she doesn't even really understand the weight of her decisions. So it's clear that he still values children to kind of maintain their youth as much as they can. And finally, she unplugs him, cries, kisses him, and is about to roll out. Hirt is trying to figure out who did this, and they're thinking it's 3 men because of the amount of damage done and how sneaky they were and how fast it was and that whole deal. And he's also making sure to really emphasize that it was Dedra's security and trying to cover his own ass, which the internal politics is one of my favorite parts of this last arc. Of course, I wish there had been more of it, but what we got was pretty good. Ben Mendelsohn as Krennic is really good this last arc. He kind of steals the show for me, even though he's not in it very much. But he's just reaming Dedra, saying that she was born to be a rebel, accusing her of being tied to Lonnie, and letting her know how serious it is that the Death Star plans got leaked because of her. I guess hospitals are the one place in Star Wars that have security cameras, but they use them to look through all the hospital and see Kleya so they know who they're looking for. We see her rip a bunch of shit apart and build a kind of Morse code computer. Again, she can just do everything. And luckily for her, Willman just always has his charged and next to him. So they eventually hear the signal, even though they're playing cards. We get a rare moment of levity and kind of humanity. And of course, it comes from K2SO and Andor, and they're playing some kind of game and kind of talking shit with K2. They identify her, and Ben Mendelsohn is going off on Hirt as well, being like, if you don't find her, you can join the seemingly never-ending Imperial Death March. And his delivery in this scene is just awesome. Hirt is obviously scared shitless, so part of guys is like, just say that she's diseased and she'll contaminate anyone who touches her, so someone will tell us where she's at, which is a pretty clever plan. But it's also interesting because it ends up backfiring, which is going to be used as an excuse to get rid of him later on. Andor once again goes to steal a ship to save Kleya. thinking it's Luthen. And we can see that the rebellion has become even more uptight now. When he gets back, he's confined to his quarters. They have all these security measures. And I think what they're going for is that the rebellion is essentially becoming just like the Empire. The kind of problem with that is we never really see it manifest in the movies or in the shitty sequels, for whatever that's worth. So for me, the parallels are kind of just interesting, but not really meaningful in the long term. And here it comes to Dedra because he's desperate. And even now, she knows them the best, and talks about how they'd be a step ahead and using the Morse code type computer that's outdated. And they make a point to say how smart it was, the way they had their computers set up, and that they'd never be able to get the information and blah, blah, blah. So he uses this old school wand thing to try to find them. And we see it's all hands on deck. Partagas is in like the ISB command center, and here is out in the field with a small squad trying to find Clea because they need to know if she managed to leak the message to anyone. And everyone is racing to get Clea first. And we see that here is really nervous and keeps saying, I need her alive. And one of the troopers makes a point to say, you already said it, like just stay behind us, kind of like the not respected officer. Andor finally finds her, and he's surprised to see that it's her and not Luthen. And then he finds out Luthen's dead, obviously, and she tries to explain to him about the connection between the Gormans, Kyber crystals, Galen Urso, Scarif, and like a handful of terms that she wants him to memorize the same way that Luthen told her to memorize them because Luthen died for it. And it's important to her and Cassian. They're getting closed in on because they had the tracing device. They went to the wrong floor first, which bought them some time for that conversation about Luthen and the connection between all the terms. And then Clea wanted to just die until Cassian refused. And K2SO will just walk around and like bitch slap troopers, and you can see him losing signal in the command center. And this all kind of feels just like a little bit tanky to me, but they're kind of ratcheting up the tension and the episode ends. And this is what I'm talking about with how much time they spent on this. Like, we got a full episode of flashbacks and her going into hiding, a full episode of her just hiding for Cassian to find her, and the ISB trying to track her down. I mean, there's plenty of nice little moments in acting in here, but at the same time, it's like, you have 3 episodes left. Move your ass. We get a little hallway fight. They get hit with a stun grenade at one point, but luckily K2SO shows up in time to save them, and they make their escape. We see some more of the tension between Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma, and they gave her that dog shit haircut that she had in Rogue One and the original movie, which is a shame because she looked much, much better every episode up until now. I really don't care for what they did with Bail Organa. He should have been part of the rebellion literally from the beginning, and he's just kind of another peanut gallery member who got to set up Mon Mothma for her speech. It just feels like he should have been way more involved and way more influential. So Andor gets taken away to answer to the council, and you can see the obvious parallels. All the people sitting in a circle, except they're in the dark instead of the pristine white of the Empire. But he's answering to them the same way that Dedra answers to her bosses or Cyril or whoever. This whole conversation boils down to they don't believe what Luthen is saying, and he sounds like a madman. And Cassian takes offense on his behalf because of how important to the rebellion that he's been. And Mon Mothma is obviously the most sympathetic one to him in this case because it saved her life directly. And this is one of the few times we actually see Andor be emotive, which is a character thing is nice, but the actor doesn't really nail it for me. He just sort of seems like he's lacking in charisma, which is weird because he's had some really good acting moments with facial expressions and that sort of thing, like after the Gorman massacre. But when he's trying to yell here and be pissed off, I don't know, it just didn't really land for me. Even though what he's saying is correct. And it is frustrating to see how dismissive they all are of Luthen when they're kind of new to the party. And we start getting references to Tivin, and this is all obviously setting up Rogue One. He goes and sees Clea in the medical area. Again, another contrast between the Empire one and theirs, and just the resources in general. And they talk about her getting a questionable welcome because Luthen's not well liked here, but they don't really do anything with it. Andor's just kind of apologetic because he made it sound like they would welcome her with open arms because the information was so important. Mon Mothma wants Vel to get a second opinion about Cassian if he's telling the truth. Obviously, you're supposed to see a little bit of development for her here regarding how trusting and sort of honest she was. And now she's trying to use Vel to get info from Cassian. Vel and Andor have a drink. She asks him just outright if it's the truth and doesn't try to play games with him. and they kind of just remember the Fallen throughout the series. And we get kind of the dismantling of the ISB as they're no longer needed. Now that the Death Star is on its way and the ISB had quite a bit of influence, they could obviously be a power struggle to Palpatine, on top of the fact that Partagaz fucked up. So they're coming to get him to arrest him. And he's actually listening to Nemik's speech, which is nice. It's a nice poetic thing about him kind of slowly seeing what the Empire has become and what his fate is going to be despite how much he did for it. And he chooses to end his own life instead. And there's a nice little shot here where obviously this room used to be full and now it's just him. And here's a little preface to the Bix thing where Vel says that Andor should reconnect with her. And he just says, well, she's safe and she wouldn't be safe with me. Again, probably a decision he wouldn't make if he knew she was pregnant. And she tells Andor don't wait too long, obviously in reference to what happened with her and Cinta, but all completely irrelevant. We see Clay walking through the rain and Vel's there for her, even though they don't really like each other. And I just wanted to point out this one shot because I thought something was going to happen. But we literally watched Vel put her drink down, stand up, put her coat on, walk out. Clay looks at her, and then the camera cuts. It's one of those things that's like, oh, I guess we're just trying to fill out the runtime. Again, they only had 12 episodes that cover 4 years of events. And there's all these self-indulgent shots like this one, along with the weird decisions on what to cover and what not to cover. Really frustrating. We see the dude that's always giving Andor a hard time, letting him know about Tivik and Kafri, and that if it's a trap, it's a brilliant one, and that they kind of need to hurry up. And we get a short scene where Mon Mothma tells Bail that he needs to listen to him and it cuts, whatever. After Bail got his off-screen talking to from Mon Mothma, he agrees to send Andor on his way. And this is kind of the final thing before we lead up into Rogue One. We get his Rogue One outfit. We see the rebels doing proper military training. Mon Mothma's with Vel. Her husband has moved on to their friend, even though he looks depressed. Clea is part of the rebellion on Yavin. Dedra's in prison crying. And I don't have a problem with what happened to her, but man, did they fucking speedrun it. Just kind of give us the bullet points. Cassian's happy to see the Jedi that force healed him. We see Saul on Jeddah where he's going to die in Rogue One. The rebellion's about to be in full force. Andor's doing his runway model walk. Him and K2SO are on their way. And Bix, who manipulated him to his death without knowing that he was a father, gets to live happy life in peace with their droid. And that's it. I'm not going to get too much into my thoughts on the whole season, because I'll probably do a separate video for that. But this was just a really anticlimactic final arc for me. And really the heart of this season was the middle 6 episodes. The structure really hurt this show all season for me. In this last arc, I just don't understand the decision to use the time the way that they did. Overall, there's a lot of really good moments in the season. Some wonky world building things. Obviously the issue I take with Bix here at the end. But there's just so much stuff that's off screened and kind of thrown into the 1 year gaps. It's really a bummer the show didn't get the full 5 years it was supposed to. I think even maybe 3 seasons could have worked really well to give them more time to flesh some things out and really keep the pace good, but explore a lot more of the characters each part instead of just writing some characters out of each arc. And also, I never want to see another fucking wheat field after Gladiator. The rest of the movie shouldn't even be allowed to have wheat. They can have corn. I'm going to leave it there for this one. If you've seen the season or this arc, or presumably both, let me know what you think. Try to respond in the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.